Today we're going to talk about maiden races. There's a lot of misinformation out there about maiden races. Now, maidens in thoroughbred racing or in quarter horses, um, maidens are horses that have never won a race. So maidens normally compete against one another until they do win a race, and then they can go and step up to another class level where they're claiming allowance stakes, etc. But again, we're talking about horses that have never won a race. Article here by Dick Mitchell. It's really interesting. I mean, obviously we've had it around a long time, and we've wrote about this often as well. And he basically says that maiden races are some of the most predictable events at the racetrack. If you're old enough, or if you've had even from back in the 40s, 50s, 60s, reading most of the turf magazines or buying systems in the 60s, 70s, or 80s. Usually, almost every one of those systems would start out saying, do not play maiden races. Now, why that became the thing back then, we have no idea. There's no science behind it because in reality, maiden races are more predictable than non-maiden races. Dick Mitchell, for instance, here, they did a big study. And on average, and we all know this, on average, the public favorite in non-maiden races wins about 33% of the time, but the public favorite in maiden races wins about 37% of the time. So that actually means that maiden races are easier to predict and are more formful than most other races. Most of the material and again, Ron Ambrose, who worked for Dick Mitchell, I used to hang out with Ron at Caesar's Palace. And a lot of the information that Dick published was from Ron Ambrose. Ron, just his mouth watered whenever a maiden race came along. I used to watch him he always find a key horse that he was pretty sure would hit the exacta, and then he'd bet big bets with the other contenders, and he probably cashed 5 or 6 out of every 9 or 10 bets he did, and sometimes really big ones. But a lot of the information and he bet little other almost strictly maiden races. He really didn't bother with many others. But that also led Dick to do some further research, and his main computer guy, Gordon Pine, who used to work for him in the 90s and the early 2000s, made a discovery that he called the bet down factor. And he found out in Southern California that 70% of all maiden allowance winners or maiden special weights are bet down from their morning line. And 60% of maiden claiming winners are also bet down. And overall, on all circuits, 66% of all maiden allowance winners were bet down. So what that means is if you're betting a maiden race, your best prospect is going to be a horse that is bet down from its morning line. So, I mean, if its morning line, again, is 5-2 and it ends up 2-1 or 9-5, or it's 5-1 and ends up at 7-2, 3-1, that's considered a bet down. And most of the maiden races in this country are won by horses that are bet down. So that's something you always want to look for. And if a maiden in a maiden race, if the horse is not bet below the morning line, then he's not a very good prospect. Basically, too, the difference, most of you probably know this, but maiden special weights are claim-proof races. It's where most of the better horses or owners who think they have better horses, think they might have potential, they'll always start them in a maiden special weight because they can't be claimed out of there. And the vast, vast majority of horses that go on to win stakes or become champions began their careers in maiden special weight races. Once a horse has raced several times in maiden special weights and just can't get the job done, he normally would be dropped into a maiden claiming race. But again, the important thing to remember here, from the main lesson from this Dick Mitchell article, is that 70% of all maiden special weight races are won by bet down horses. Now, we've got a really neat method too, a profitable method from Mark Cramer. This is so darn simple, but it still over the years has shown a decent long-term profit. The rules are very simple. we're dealing only with maiden special weight horses. The horse must have a layoff of at least 45 days and only have 1 or 2 races, no more than that. So in other words, a horse has started once or twice and has a 45-day layoff, that will qualify him. And again, the previous races must have also been made in special weight. And what might seem obvious, no shippers. You're not going to use any shippers that come from a smaller minor track to a major league track. And then the next rule is a trainer must have a 12% or better win rate overall. Now, Mark's original system is just basically that. You take this first rule, lay off of 45 days, only 1 or 2 career races, all previous races special weight, and trainer has a 12%. Now, betting this alone, just using those 2 rules, these horses won often enough to produce an 8% ROI, which is nothing to laugh at. It beats the track take considerably. But Len added a rule which increased the overall hit rate by about 3%. He took the trainer and jockey win rate combined, and if it exceeds 28%, then those horses won even more frequently. In fact, Mark went to SportsStat back when he developed this, had Jim Bale do a study on it. And Jim basically worked on what could be considered an expected win percentage in situations, which was 14%. But when using Mark's rules, the actual win rate was 18.5%. And the average mutual was in the $14, $15 range, and that's what produced the nice profit. Again, Mark showed overall 8% win rate, which if the track's taking 18% and you're making 8%, you're actually making 26% because you're beating the take. He also relates a story where Brad Free won a handicapping contest thanks to this rule, thanks to these rules on a maiden race that put him over the top, a maiden return horse that qualified by these rules. And then there's 2 other situations which enhance the win percentage. If there's a rider switch, any kind of rider switch, didn't seem to matter to lower percentage, higher percentage, it didn't seem to matter, but that actually increased the win percentage by about 2%. And the second, and more importantly, if the horse is coming back as a 3-year-old after the layoff. So let's say he's run 2 races. He ran 2 races in 2020 as a 2-year-old, as a maiden, has a 45-day layoff, and then comes back in 2021 as a 3-year-old. That improved the overall win rate by about 4.5%. So again, this is definitely something you want to follow, because anything that makes a profit in this game, especially when it's simple, is definitely worthwhile. And again, the overall prices on these horses tend to be pretty high, especially these returning 3-year-olds, because like Mark says, the buyer ratings on a 2-year-old are going to be lower than horses and 3-year-old buyer figures, or any kind of speed figures, not just buyers. So again, the public's going to be looking at this horse's 2-year-old races and say, gee, this horse didn't earn much of a figure, and now he's in with 3-year-olds. And so he's going to be let go at a price. We've seen $40 prices with this method, many in the $20 to $40 range. And again, the average mutual was close to $15. So the whole idea is you're dealing with a lightly raced horse and a patient trainer, 2 really important factors, because lightly raced horses outperform most class levels. Lightly raced horses outperform the ones who are just have been starting over and over again and stale. And patience is a primary asset, he says, of a trainer. And that means the trainer is resting his horse and finding a spot where he can be 100% sound and confident that the horse will run a big race. So again, just remember, maiden races are not that impossible like so many system writers have written. If you just follow some of the simple information that we just gave to you, you'll be one of the few folks out there at the track that are actually winning on maiden races. Next, we'll have another video on claiming, low-level claiming races probably in a couple of weeks, which is really interesting. We've got another couple of systems we're going to take a look at. Thanks.